No, no, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. These words, taken from Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech, "I have a dream," have their origin in the writings of the prophet Amos, from where the first reading of the 15th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Year B, is taken. In biblical history, each prophet was chosen to deliver a special message at a special time. The pre-exilic prophet Amos, also known as the prophet of social justice, was from the southern kingdom of Juda but was sent to prophesy in the northern kingdom of Israel. So why was Amos, a simple shepherd and farmer, sent to a foreign land? During the close to 40-year rule of Jeroboam II, the kingdom of Israel prospered with a booming economy which focused on exporting luxury items like olive oil and wine. The surplus wealth also made Israel a strong military force. However, as we see in our world today, the surplus wealth back then too was controlled by the rich who oppressed the poor, which is a definite no for God. It is in this context that we have the first reading today. Amasias, the local priest, conspires against Amos and complains to the king. He insults Amos by calling him a seer, a term which means one who prophesies for money, and tells him to go back to his hometown and earn there. Amos then reveals that he is not a prophet who works for money, but rather he is sent by Yahweh with the message that if Israel doesn't change its ways, it shall surely be led away captive from their own land. And so it was. Before that generation had passed, the nation had gone from being a superpower to being the 10 lost tribes of Israel. One takeaway from this narrative is that we don't really have to become something special to catch God's attention. We don't need a big education or have some big talent. We see that in the case of Amos as well as the apostles. They were all simple and unlearned people. When God is with us, there is nothing to fear, for even a poor shepherd could walk up and denounce one of the greatest military kingdoms of its time. The second reading, taken from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, gives us a brief sketch of his theology. Paul begins by ascribing blessings or praise to God in response to the blessings that God bestowed on us. Paul says that God chose us before the foundation of the world, not only before our birth, but before creation, when there was only God, thereby implying that the action and initiative of salvation was God's, not ours. Our holiness is not something that we attain by spiritual self-discipline, but by Christ's sacrifice on the cross. Paul then stresses that we are a part of God's family as his sons and daughters, and it is his good pleasure that we should be restored to our rightful place in his family for which he created us. Christ is the agent through whom God unites all things and bestows his blessings on us. The good news is that our destiny is not determined by random forces, but by God, who has a plan for our lives and works all things to carry out that plan. We glorify God by our worship and obedience to his will. When we bring our lives into congruence with his will, the witness of our lives will honor him and also draw others to him. Although we are God's own possession, our sin has created a barrier between us and him. Yet he paid the ransom through Christ's death to effect the redemption of that which belongs to him. And we are the possession that belongs to him. When God redeems us, our redeemed lives then begin to give God the praise of His glory. The word apostle comes from the Greek word apostello, which means sent out. And in the Gospel taken from Mark, we have the narrative of the mission of the 12 apostles being sent out by Jesus. This section is a turning point in Jesus' ministry, as before this, only Jesus preached the gospel message and cured people. However, Jesus sends out the 12 not as individuals, but 2 by 2, as partners, giving each other strength and encouraging each other in difficult circumstances. Quite contrary to what we would pack today for any trip, the disciples were asked to carry the bare minimum, depending on local hosts, but above all, trusting God to provide for their needs. Jesus' instructions to the apostles highlight one of the important aspects of discipleship. They need to have tremendous faith. Much like the Israelites in the desert with the manna, our Lord wanted His disciples to trust and depend upon Him completely. The latter part of the text speaks about shaking off of the dust that is on the feet. It was customary in those times, due to the division between the Jews and Gentiles, that Jews returning from Gentile lands should shake off pagan dust as a gesture of cleansing and contempt. Shaking the dust off one's feet conveys the same idea as our modern phrase, "I wash my hands of it." It is a symbolic indication that one has done all that can be done in a situation and therefore carries no further responsibility for it. Even the dust of those cities that rejected the Lord was an abomination and would not be allowed to cling to the feet of God's messengers. Jesus' instruction to shake the dust off our feet reminds us that we are only responsible for our obedience to God and not the results of that obedience. When we look at the first reading and the Gospel, there is a common theme of being sent. Amos and the disciples of Jesus were both sent out on a mission. But in both cases, there was a chance of the people refusing the life-giving message. As a priest, I know how discouraging it is to see people in the congregation not paying any attention to what you are saying. Today's readings have a special message for all of us who are at some level or the other engaged in church ministry. The apostles were to focus on the mission and not on their personal comfort. We are called to serve in the church without expecting personal benefits, be it monetary or otherwise. In contrast to the false teachers, the disciples were not to put a price on their ministry. We are in a particular position to serve and not to boss over people. God chooses ordinary people like Amos and the apostles to work in His vineyard. Ordinary people like you and me. So if God is asking you to join in His work, take courage and say yes. The qualification list doesn't include a charming personality or a fantastic degree, but the only requirement is faith. I pray that each one of us accepts the mission that God is asking us to undertake. May God bless us all.